Hello, thank you for joining me again today. I thought I would take you through the basic steps that I used to create this brooch using one ring tatted flowers. It may look difficult, but it's actually the variegated thread that does all the work. Okay, the first step is to create your tatted flowers. Using your one ring with as many picots as you would like, in any color. These are all plain colors, but as you can see, this is multicolor. Here are some examples, other examples of different multicolored flowers I have made. And these flowers, these all have the picots left as loops. These picots I have cut to make them a little more fluffy. And as you can see, the variegated thread, this is all one thread. The variegated thread is what does all the work. And I've put these flowers on a more taupe colored background. And some more examples on an ivory colored background. And here's an example that I used some old denim, a way to reuse some jeans if you're getting ready to get rid of those. I used some old denim and just made flowers out of white and blue. And a trick that I've learned, if you're arranging the flowers, use some tweezers to put them in the position that you want before you start sewing them on. Okay, back to your tatted flowers. Once you have your one ring tatted flowers made, then you're going to cut off those tails so you just have the flower left. Now, I would recommend for this project tying a knot, so when you are manipulating these flowers and sewing them on, the ring doesn't come undone. And then you just clip off those ends. Now, doing this, you're going to end up with a lot of ends. I would recommend that you hold on to those, because then you can use them at a later time to stuff little projects. I always keep all of my ends, and I use them all up. Okay, the next step after you have all of your flowers made is you are going to find a template for the shape that you want to make. And I used an oval shape. And if you don't have a purchased template, you could use a glass or plastic container from around the house and just trace around that. You don't necessarily have to have purchased templates like this. To begin with, you're going to either use muslin, cotton fabric, or any type of woven fabric. This is muslin here. Most of the examples I'm going to show today are using felt, because the felt does not need to be ironed. So if you are using a light colored background, I used a heat erasable pen to trace the shape onto the felt. Then I took some scrap thread and I ran a basting line around on the wrong side. That way on the right side, you have a general idea of the design area that you can use, because the basting line will be eventually removed. If you are using a dark color, and this is a technique that took me quite a long time to come up with. If you are using a dark color, you could try to use a white pencil, or if you have a white pen that you know works well, you could do that. I don't know if you can see that. I tried a white pencil on this. Or you can just cut a piece of paper or freezer paper. Cut out the template of the shape, pin that on, and then run your basting line along that on the back. Okay, the next step, once you have your front piece, you will eventually need a back piece that's going to cover your stitching on the back. You can do this right now, but I would recommend not cutting that out until you are ready to sew it on. That way you can cut it out to the exact size that you need, but you can trace a general shape at the beginning. You will also need a piece of either mat board, thick so that it doesn't bend. And if you're going to be using a light colored fabric or felt, you can see and if your mat board is rather dark, you can also cut a piece of paper just to lighten it up so it doesn't show through. That's just my personal preference. If you don't have mat board, and you do need this to be stiff because you're going to be pulling on it, you don't really want it to be flexible, just use some cardboard. 2 or 3 layers of cardboard. This is just cereal box that I cut, and then you just tape them together. So then you've got your mat board. You will also need either 1 or 2 layers of felt, or you can use quilt batting, or you can reuse other things. I have lots of these ornament boxes that I bought to use at my craft shows that I probably will never use all of them, but they all come with batting, pre-cut batting in them. So I've paid for the boxes. There's no need for me to pay for batting again. I reuse this and cut out my shape from that. So now you've got your front piece, your back piece, excuse me, your mat board, and your felt. The next step will be to sew your flowers on. And you just choose a color thread that you think is the best match. For this example, I used white thread and blue thread. So you sew your flowers on, and then this is an optional step. Use some embroidery thread and create a French knot or colonial knot in the center of each flower, and then use either pearl cotton or DMC stranded floss and just randomly stitch in leaves in between. If you don't really feel comfortable doing embroidery, you can always cut out little felt leaves and sew those on. This is stranded DMC. I think there was 1 or 2 strands there. And you just stitch in leaves to fill in. Once you have all of the leaves and flowers stitched on, contained within your basted area, the next steps are going to be, you're going to cut a very, very long piece of thread, either single strand but very strong, or a double strand, because you're going to be pulling on this quite tightly. Run a gathering line all the way around the outside, about 1/2 inch or so around the outside. And you just put that aside. Turning it over, you're going to place your batting and your mat board on top, contained within your basting line. This is an optional step, but it's one that I use. I take a piece of double-sided tape and just lay it here so that when I am manipulating this, it doesn't move. You don't have to do that step, but I usually do. Once you have that, you can turn it back over and you can remove your basting lines, or you can pull up the gathering lines a little bit like this. So you can see, and then you can adjust however you want. And then remove your basting lines, and then continue pulling tightly like this. Then you're going to take your needle and you're going to start anchoring stitches all the way around. I did this in another example here. You're going to end up, here's my little denim example that I've done. You're going to end up lacing the entire back. And once you start, you just anchor a stitch over here, and then you keep working either clockwise, counterclockwise, however you feel comfortable, but you want to lace the entire back, pulling as you go to tighten the fabric around the mat board. And then when you're entirely done, you anchor that thread. And I also wanted to say in here, depending on what you would like to use this for, if you are going to make a brooch, you can cut this thread off now because you're going to place your brooch piece on there. But if you're going to make an ornament, say, I would recommend leaving this thread attached and stitching your ribbon on right here before you cut this off. It's just an added extra little bit of security. So you cut off your thread. Then depending on if you want a brooch with your felt backing, and as you can see now, you have this line of stitching here. You want to make sure that's all covered. That's why you don't cut this up at the beginning. You place your backing piece there to see how far around the edge you need to cut. You can always cut off. It's easier to cut off than it is to add back on. So then turn that over. If you're going to make a brooch, Now is the time you sew your brooch back on to your felt backing. If you're going to make an ornament, if you choose not to stitch the ribbon to the back, you can always stitch the ribbon onto your felt backing. And then you cut the backing to shape and you stitch that on securely all the way around. If you choose not to make a brooch or an ornament, you can just stitch your felt backing on, and then once you're done, you can always glue a magnet on there. And there's your finished brooch. I hope this tutorial has been informative and gives you some inspiration to try these on your own. Thank you for watching.